everyone, welcome to this edition of India Inc. 2.0. I'm Nayantara Rai. Today my guest is Devansh Jain. He's the third gen of $3 billion Inox Group, running like the wind, building up the wind business. Welcome Devansh. Thanks for talking to ET now.
Thank you, Nayantara. Thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Devansh, I was reading about you. You're the third gen from the Inox Group. You could have literally done anything you wanted. You have been born with a silver spoon. You didn't like chemicals. You didn't like the multiplex business. Why did you convince the family to enter the wind business?
You know, I think it sounds much easier when people just say you're born with a golden spoon or a silver spoon. The pressures you need to take and the expectations you have from a business family to take the legacy forward is fairly intense. When I came back from Carnegie Mellon, I spent a couple of years, the first 2 years, in the different group businesses, which was chemicals, gases, cinemas, and so on and so forth. So it's not like that I didn't like those businesses, but I think you always want to create your own identity. It was fortunate for me that we were looking at diversifying the group at that point in time from the existing businesses. And the opportunity which was in front of us was wind amongst other options. And then, you know, working with McKinsey.
So was it your idea or was it your dad's idea?
Well, so we were toying. You know, because of a CDM project in Gujarat Fluorochemicals, which is the parent of Inox Wind, we were convinced about the future of renewable energy. So that was something which was back there in our mind, that renewables is here to stay and it's probably going to get larger and larger. And I'm talking of sometime around 2009, 2010, when renewables was not as sexy as it is today.
Yeah. Is it sexy today?
Well, I think so. The stock market and the government seems to be only talking about renewables. Yeah. We'll come to where we are, but clearly renewables is the flavor of the day today. So I think we were working with McKinsey at that point in time, and then we had a plain blue vanilla sky approach where we were looking at a host of industries. We looked at hotels, we looked at hospitals, we looked at a couple of other options along with renewables. And I think what came out of that was renewables is here to stay, and I think we could build a fairly large business on the renewable side fairly quickly. So that's how we plunged into renewables, and that's something which I started building from scratch since I was back in India from college at that point in time.
So you said there's obviously a lot of pressures that come with it as well, and you were really young when you decided to enter the wind business and you spearheaded an IPO.
Well, it worked out fortunately for me. The first 3 years, obviously, when we started building the wind business was very, very tough. I think the advantage was Dad gave me the initial capital, which was 20 crores. To build the wind business, and then he left me. He was always there for guidance. Of course, we had group people who were available to support us, but I think he let me play and gave me the freedom to struggle, fall, do whatever had to be done. And
if you lost the 20 crore rupees then?
Well, I suppose we could afford it, as I may put it. But you know, as I said, the pressures or the expectations of a business family or a business group are such that there is no alternative to other than succeeding, and just had to succeed.
So tell me something, when you would go for the road shows for the IPOs, would it be just you or would your dad accompany you as well?
Well, I think it was primarily me, along with our group CFO, which was most of the road shows in India and Hong Kong and Singapore. Dad did accompany me for some of the road shows in US and in Europe, but that's because he just thought that there needs to be someone who's older around.
Yeah.
It obviously adds more credibility and punch, but I suppose the wind business was roaring at that point in time, and I think investors really look for a lot of passion and energy in what you've built. So I suppose I kind of handled that.
But why did you go for an IPO? You don't like debt?
So as a group, debt is something which does not fit in our mind space. It started with my grandfather, who's completely opposed to debt. While we do understand as the next gen that you need debt to a certain extent to build businesses, you can't scale up rapidly. We have scaled up businesses very, very rapidly, including the wind business. But I think why Inox Wind needed to IPO at that point in time, because we were scaling up very, very rapidly. So for example, when we IPO'd, we'd gone from 0 to about 3,000 crores of sales in a period of 4 years. We were hugely profitable in that business. But to take it to the next phase of growth, we needed more capital to come in, or the ability to be able to raise more capital. And renewables was becoming very hot at that point in time. That's the time when the Modi government came to power. 2015 is when we IPO'd. So we thought it's an opportune time. The company was fairly sizable. And we had we had a whole host of investors who wanted, who were willing to take a piece of that. So we IPO'd, and I think and thereafter there was no looking back, except for the fact that the last year has been a very, very tumultuous year for the sector, given the abrupt transition from a feed-in tariff regime to an auction regime. Of course, it bodes well for the future of the sector and for us. But yeah, I think the IPO enabled us to access a much deeper pool of capital, create enough reserves, and take the company to the next phase of growth.
I think FY18 will go down as the one year you may want to forget, or it could be a year where you really grew up. There were 4 straight quarters of losses that had to be reported. What has happened? Is it only because the government has decided on an auction system, or what?
What happened was, globally there was a shift taking place from a feed-in tariff regime to an auctioning regime in many countries. Auctioning leads to more transparency, leads to the most competitive players surviving, and leads to lower prices probably being discovered. That's what happened in India, where tariffs declined drastically from a feed-in tariff regime to the auction regime. I think the pain that came along with that was, I don't think the government had anticipated when you transition from a feed-in tariff regime to an auction regime, there would be a complete stoppage of all feed-in tariff regime projects across the country. They thought there would be a smooth transition, or at least that was the plan, that you'll transition from projects which were approved under the feed-in tariff regime, build that out, and gradually move to the auction regime. What actually transpired was, all the projects which were under construction, which were work in progress, various state governments just stopped accepting those projects. They stopped honoring signed PPAs or projects for which PPAs had been approved, which led to a situation where the entire country was on the entire sector came to a standstill. All the projects we were building out just stopped because our customers stopped paying us, stopped accepting deliveries. The inventories which we were carrying, which would have been consumed for the projects, we had a 1,000 megawatt order book, which was good visibility for 15 to 18 months, which was probably the largest order book or the second largest order book in the sector. That became a piece of paper. So there was nothing you could do. There was no avenue where the turbines could go. There was no customer willing to accept those turbines. Of course, nobody expected that regulatory clarity in terms of the auctions and the policies would take 12 to 15 months to come out. But unfortunately, it took 12 to 15 months for the regulatory regime to get cleared. Having said that, those 4 quarters, we virtually had nil sales. So we went from almost 4,000 crores to literally 400 crores of sales. Yeah. So it probably went down as the most painful period in our group's history, where we were a AA- rated company. We had banks lining up on an ongoing basis. We had huge cash reserves. And over this period, everything that could go wrong went wrong.
Yeah.
But that was a painful period. I think we are fully back now. We've come back very strongly. I think given our cost competitiveness, I think we've probably been the most successful people under the auction regime. We've got some of the largest partnerships built out with some of the largest corporates who are on the renewables side. We've now got an order book in excess of 1,000 megawatts, which we are playing out.
But that's what you had before the crisis.
That's right, but that went to zero.
Yeah.
So 1,000 went to zero overnight. We had no orders because those orders were a piece of paper because you had no
And
stakes.
You were just sitting with this inventory?
We were sitting with inventory. We were sitting with supplies which we had done to people, which they stopped accepting because there was
just
no
as well
PPA.
You don't like debt. That would have been a big problem if you had debt.
Well, fortunately, we had very limited debt. Our leverage was 0.3, so we didn't have any long-term debt. It was all working capital debt. I think we managed this period. I think the group was strong, but we went and explained to all the banks. We'd not bet banks for a long period of time because we barely had debt, and it was a very comfortable, strong company.
What about shareholders? No activist shareholders?
Well, our market cap collapsed. We went from almost $1 billion plus to now $350 million of market cap. But that's with zero sales and losses for 4 quarters. I think obviously you had investors dump the stock. I would say we were one of the most loved stocks in the market for 2 years. And then over this one period, we probably went from being loved to untouchables. But I think we went out and explained to investors what was going on. It was not something which was unique to us. It was something which affected the entire sector. It's like saying if you put up a thermal power project and the government goes and cancels your coal mines, or there is no coal.
It has happened.
You
It
can't
has
do that,
happened
right?
in
There's
this
nothing which is
country,
going to
right?
happen.
Yeah.
But those were, to some extent, those were where people, the government said, you shouldn't have been allotted the coal mines, so on and so forth. Here there was no allotment. It's just that the country stopped honoring all PPAs. So where does the manufacturer go? There was no place to sell turbines.
Yeah.
But I think we are past that period. I think the future looks very, very robust. As I mentioned, we probably have created one of the largest order books in the sector again. We are implementing orders. I think going forward, we probably going to be back to profitable growth, very profitable growth, hopefully.
So with that note, how Devansh Jain is going to turn the wind his favor, going from a darling to an untouchable, back to being a darling on the stock markets, we'll find out after this short commercial break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching India Inc. 2.0. I'm Nayantara Rai. Today my guest is Devansh Jain, the third gen of the $3 billion Inox Group, who's built the wind business. We were just talking about Inox Wind and the tumultuous financial year 2018 that was for you. But now you're convinced that things are only going to look up. You're back to having one of the highest order books,
That's
like
right.
you were telling us before the commercial break. So things have now settled down, basically.
Well, they're settling down. I think quarter on quarter, we're going to see very profitable growth as well as revenues coming back. I think it's a matter of another quarter or two, hopefully, that we should be back to good old days, hopefully.
So Devansh, tell me something. You also have to compete with people who have serious backing or have been around for a while. You can look at maybe Sumant Sinha, who's well known in India Inc. and etc. You have Suzlon, which is also out there. Then you have global giants like GE as well. How do you compete?
Well, to be honest, with respect to Sumant and IPPs, we don't compete with IPPs because we're suppliers to IPPs. So that's a power
really
of
different business
producing
model.
game.
Okay.
Yes, we're competing with manufacturers like Suzlon and GE and so on and so forth. But I think that comes. We've been competing with when we started the wind business, we had almost 40 manufacturers in the country. Of course, the top 5 probably controlled 75% of the market. And we were nobodies at that point in time, at least as Inox Wind was. I think how we built this business was we focused very, very hard on costs, bottom line, and being very efficient. And that's the reason Inox Wind probably had or has the highest EBITDA margins, not just in India, but probably globally as well. Our cost of manufacturing turbines are not just the lowest in India, but probably we're probably the lowest cost producers of wind turbines globally.
You mean you'll be more efficient than a GE, for example?
Well, from a cost of manufacturing perspective, yes. I think our administrative costs, our overheads, our manufacturing costs are very, very lean. We've built, that's reflected in our profitability as well, barring when you don't have sales. But I think we're effectively able to compete with any of these guys because it's a two-pronged thing. One is cost, and second is being up to date with respect to technology. And I think we've been right there at the forefront with respect to technology, whether it was bringing double-fed induction generators to this country or higher hub heights or larger rotor diameters. Because while cost may be one thing, if you have an outdated technology,
there's no point.
You're never going to be able to compete.
And you have to keep constantly updates, right?
Absolutely. You need to be right there competing with the top 3 or 4 guys. And for the past 2 or 3 years, we are the top 3 manufacturers in the country.
So would you say you're also an ambassador of Make in India?
For sure, absolutely.
So now that sales are coming back, the order book is coming back, what are your expansion plans, if you have any, or you just want things to stabilize? What would be your message to shareholders?
Well, I think our immediate focus is to get back to sales, get back to profitable growth, stabilize the company operations, which were virtually on a shutdown for the last financial year. And I think that's increasingly happened quarter on quarter. We should be able to do that and hopefully get the company back to the strengths and the position it was until a year ago. There are no expansion plans as such with respect to capex programs because we had undertaken a capex program about 2 years ago where we've built manufacturing capacity for almost 1600 megawatts of supplying turbines per annum. So I think we have a fairly robust manufacturing capacity on the ground. We have one of the largest project side inventories in the country, which is upwards of 4 or 5 gigawatts. I think it's just going to be execution, supplying, and building the reserves back for Inox Wind.
So tell me something, from a market capitalization of $1 billion to about $300 million, obviously investors press the sell button, obviously because of regulatory challenges, etc. Are you perhaps also now going to go out to the market or reach out via roadshows, etc., to say it's all stabilizing or that now you have a healthy order book?
Oh, absolutely. I think it would require more proactive engagement. We have been doing that over the year, obviously to convince and keep shareholders informed about what was happening in the sector, where we are headed, what's been happening, where we see the sector going. Of course, there's a lot more knowledge available to investors now. It's been 15 months since the sector had transitioned from FIT to auction, so people understand what auctions are. The government has made massive announcements of putting up 10 gigawatts of auctions year on year. About a month ago, they came up with a plan to expand the renewable energy targets from 175 gigs, wind and solar, to now 228 gigs till 2028. So I think investors are fairly well informed. I think what investors would naturally be looking at, when do you turn the corner, when do sales begin, when do you turn back to profit? And I think it's a natural progression.
Yeah.
You get back to sales, you get your profits, people coming back, your stock gets re-rated hopefully, and I think we are hopeful. Yeah, people will come back to the stock.
Do you think if this current financial year you'll close in the green, like you'll declare a profit? Is it looking like that?
You know, we can't make forward-looking statements. We're a listed company,
You
but
can
I
give
think,
guidance.
we don't give guidances, but it's fairly natural that once your sales begin, we will be back in the black. And as I mentioned, sales have begun. So it's not rocket science.
Have you got big orders of late that you can update us on?
Well, our order book, we publicly disclose our order book at the end of every quarter. Our order book as of the last disclosure was a 950 megawatts, which would tantamount to about 6,000 odd crores of top line visibility. And we continue to build on that order book as we keep going forward. So
you talked about the government and the Narendra Modi government's ambitious push towards renewable energy. They're one of the most proactive ministers, Mr. Piyush Goyal, who's been in charge of this as well. Would you say that after wind, solar would be a natural progression, or that's something you're not interested in, or is that also a space which is, quite busy at the moment?
So we manufacture turbines and put up projects along with the manufacturing.
You would manufacture panels also?
Well, we could get into panel manufacturing. It was a natural progression.
Yeah.
But there is no money being made by panel manufacturers globally. In fact, 90% of panels which come into India are coming from outside India, which are primarily China and to some extent Taiwan. And I think you have a couple of these big Chinese panel manufacturers are listed as well. All of them are loss making.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do something where we're going to make losses. I think the group is always focused on bottom line. We would do anything and everything which makes money for the company. So
do you have global aspirations?
We've looked and studied at a lot of the African nations as well as a lot of the Southeast Asian nations to supply turbines. But I think the Indian market is so large, and if you do 1,000 megawatts, that's over $1 billion of top line. And if you look at our historical margins, we were probably amongst the top 100, 150 odd companies in the country in terms of profitability. And that was about 4,000 crores.
So right
of sales.
now, you're not looking at it.
Not really. I think there's enough and more which can be done in India very, very profitably.
So hold that thought. We're going to take a short commercial break. Stay tuned. You're watching India Inc. 2.0. Welcome back. You're watching India Inc. 2.0. I'm Nayantara Rai. Today I am in conversation with Devansh Jain. He's from the Inox Group, the third gen. Devansh, we've talked a lot about the wind business. You also have another business which is a fun business, serious business however, multiplexes. Do you look at that at all?
Well, no, not operationally. My brother Siddharth Jain looks after that business. But yeah, we're fairly well informed about what's happening in the business. That business was started out of Delhi when I was a kid. So we used to get daily MISs on how many samosas are sold, how many popcorns are sold. So while you mentioned it's a serious business, but it was a lot of fun. And we used to get questioned, dad used to question me at that point in time, how many samosas are done today at which cinema? So I do understand that business fairly well, but that's not something which I look after on a day-to-day basis.
So you do understand the business very well, and so when you read about how some states may say that you should sell food items at MRP, outside food should be allowed, that's bad for you guys.
Well, I wouldn't make too many comments on that today because it's a little political out there, but yeah, it's fairly irrational what's going on. We're working towards a solution, and I think hopefully logic will prevail. I don't think you would want to go to an Oberoi or a Taj and have any random person sitting next to you with his tiffin box, right? You go to these hotels to order food, then you pay them the price you pay them. Similarly, you come to a multiplex to enjoy the environment and the comfort which a cinema provides you. We are not forcing anybody to buy our colas and our popcorns, and we're not forcing people to buy tickets at the prices we sell them at. And they range. You've got low cost tickets, you've got high cost tickets. You can afford it, you do it. You can't afford it, don't do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think some things are very abrupt in this country on the regulatory front, and I think that's not very healthy from a business environment perspective.
But tell me something. Your family business is in the multiplex business. Is there ever a fear that the business could die out? Like Shah Rukh Khan has said that he was once talking to a few guys in the multiplex business, and they feel that we need to reinvent, we need to provide something which the cinema goers are not used to, because now you have a Netflix, you have an Amazon Prime, you have enough abundant options at home, and home theater systems are also far more affordable than what they used to be.
I think what's happening on the cinema business, and I suppose we look at the West, because Netflix and a lot of the streaming platforms.
Look at what's happening with all these deals that are taking place because of fear, right?
Sure, but I think we look at the West because you simply had Netflix and so on and so forth start out from there. So you can see the curve there, what's happening on the cinema side. Let's not forget, going to a movie is an experience. It is an outing. People can always watch movies at home. We still have a lot of piracy in India. People could always buy pirated movies for $100. You go to watch cricket matches, you go for music shows, you go for concerts, because it's an outing and entertainment. You could just sit on your sofa in your house and just watch it on the TV. But people need entertainment, people need social outings. That's how human beings are built. So what's changing on the cinema side is you need to make the whole cinema experience more luxurious, more advanced. So you've got things like, you've got the 3D experience, you've got the IMAX experience, you've got very 4DX, you've got, Kiddles, our cinema concept which we've made for kids. You've got stuff like very, very elaborate menus built by master chefs. It's no longer just about a Coke and a popcorn and so on and so forth. You've got very, very elaborate menus serving Chinese, falafels, pizzas, Italian, so on and so forth. And everybody wants entertainment. Yeah, why do you go out partying? Why do you go out and meet friends? You could just you could FaceTime and just be in your house. Yeah, you don't need to. Human beings need to socially interact with people. And I think what we're doing on our cinema side, we're also upgrading a lot of our cinemas. We're gradually moving from basic cinemas to luxurious cinemas. We're moving from normal cinema seats to insignia seats, which are our ultra plush luxurious cinemas. And I think that business will continue to grow. We are a very underscreened population in India.
Yeah.
So it's stable growth, high-end growth. I think that.
But does the family ever talk about the fact that you're around, and then you've got a competitor like PVR, which is way ahead, or like at least with the number of screens or penetration?
Well, I don't think they're way ahead. So we've got about 540 odd screens. They're at about 640 odd screens. We're probably number 1 and 2. For 3 or 4 years, we were ahead of them. They made some acquisitions. They got ahead. 20% here and there is not really going to make any difference. We may make another acquisition and get ahead of them. For us, as I mentioned,
are you looking at an acquisition?
Well, we're always looking at greenfield and brownfield opportunities. Yeah.
What a diplomatic answer.
Huh? You forget that business is in my blood, right?
We're talking like a politician right now. But tell me, Devansh, you at one point were also looking at the FMCG business, and you said, how it would have great synergy with the multiplex business. Is that still happening?
Well, we started building that business. I think we built it fairly aggressively over a period of 8 months. From what I understand, what we'd achieved in those 8 months was fairly phenomenal. Unfortunately, given the pains that the wind sector was going through the last financial year, we put a hold on that. I don't think it was the right time for me to build out something when we had to go through this pain period. I think once the wind business gets back on shape over the course of this financial year, and we are robust again, we could always build out another business.
So had you started manufacturing facilities, or were you outsourcing it to vendors?
So what we were doing is we were focusing on building distribution. The fundamentals of an FMCG business is distribution.
Yeah.
Manufacturing is not rocket science. We have, like I said, very, very complex industrial operations.
Yeah.
That's a piece of cake, the FMCG manufacturing business. So we outsourced all of that. What we were doing was putting a lot of foot soldiers on the ground to build out distribution across 7
and that would have to be
cities.
from scratch, literally.
That was from scratch. That was right. So we built that very, very aggressively over a period of 7 or 8 months. But yeah, we had to pause it. Sometimes you need to take tough calls. We took that call. But I'm hopeful in a
next
short period of time,
financial year?
we'll start building it out.
How much could that business cost you?
The plan was to get to a certain size, monthly revenue, and then start acquiring smaller companies to build scale. Now, obviously, when we were getting to that target, we probably have been another quarter or 2 quarters away from building out acquisitions. And we were looking at a lot of acquisitions on the FMCG side. But that never happened. So I suppose once we start building that again, it's not sizable investments in terms of building
And would
the
this be
business
done
back.
by Inox Leisure?
No, this was an independent company being funded by the promoters directly.
Okay.
This was not part of the existing listed
Because
companies.
FMCG is once again the buzzword. Everything related with consumption, for example, is skyrocketing in the market.
Well, that's also the reason why we got into FMCG. So what we saw was we're in a host of industrial businesses, whether it's chemicals or gases or cryogenics or even wind turbines. We only had Inox Leisure on the consumer side or a FMCG play. We thought we need to get into more consumer related sectors as opposed to industrial sectors. So we thought the name is well known, use that and leverage that to build out a consumer play. Of course, it was not really leveraging Inox Leisure because we are not selling food within the cinema. The cinema sells its own food to make its own margins. So we're not going to cannibalize the margins they make.
Yeah.
But the name
Even though you could
Inox
sell it
is
at
well known.
MRP.
Let's not get there. We'll keep that for a different time.
Fair enough. And with that, Devansh, you're running out of time. So I'm going to thank you and here's wishing you all the very best for the wind business and everything else that you want to get into.
It was a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you, Nayantara.